think we are now connected back again. Where was I? Talking about the upcoming East River Jazz Fest that begins Friday. We're now into Wednesday, so it's 2 days from now. Udobi Hope, he's a pianist. He's going to do a project called Mad Monk, where he's going to do whatever his interpretation of Monk's music is. He's an interesting pianist. I've known him for quite a while. I think we first worked together. I'm trying to remember who he performed with. It was in Baltimore at T-Volve. It's a cafe that I did a series back in around 2010, I think, the fall of 2010. And that's when I first met him. Someone brought him over to perform. I can't remember who that was. It might have been NASA Aberde is someone I've worked with quite a bit. But at any rate, he's doing a project on Friday night at WEAC Radio. That's located at 1918 Martin Luther King Avenue, Southeast. WEAC Radio is an alternative radio station that pushes a lot of interesting programs that we should be listening to. In fact, you can dial them up online, and you can also listen to them on AM radio, local in DC. And it begins at 8 o'clock, that particular performance. The next day, the 10th, we're going to be doing a 2 o'clock in the afternoon performance at the Anacostia Community Museum. It's a part of the Smithsonian system. And that performance will be led by Pepe Gonzalez, who's going to look at the presence of African music in Latin music, and he's especially looking at how Dizzy Gillespie and Thelonious Monk played with Latin themes in terms of bebop. His wife Imani is going to perform as well. That should be really interesting. Anyway, that's on Saturday. That's at 2 in the afternoon. And people should go online to www.eastriverjazz.net to actually register to come. The event on Friday night is $15. The event on Saturday afternoon is absolutely free. But if you go to eastriverjazz.net, you get a space, because spaces are limited in both of those situations. I think about 40 or 50 people, because it's about all we can accommodate at WEAC Radio. And at the Anacostia Museum, the space maybe accommodates about 75 to 80 people. So they're small audience spaces. Then on Sunday morning, outdoors at the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens, Charles Vermont Woods is going to do a piece called Mystical Monk for 1 hour. It's a duet. He and a drummer whose name I can't remember right off will perform together, interpreting Monk's music in that fashion. Charles is a rather avant-garde type of performance, so that you're going to hear something totally different than what Udobi does on Friday nights, for instance. And they are 2 of 4 interpreting performances of Thelonious Monk's music. Why Monk? Well, Monk this year in October will have, if he had lived, would turn 100. So is the case for Ella Fitzgerald, who turned 100 back in April, and Dizzy Gillespie, who will have turned 100 in October as well. There's some others, I think Buddy Rich, Lena Horne, a number of different people who would be 100 years old this year. We're celebrating Fitzgerald, Gillespie, and Monk. So then we come to Sunday afternoon. I talked about Sunday morning. That's Charles Vermont Woods. It's at 10 o'clock. It's at the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens. And then on Sunday afternoon, Tia Ide is going to do a program interpreting Ella Fitzgerald's music. And that's going to be interesting. She's got a nice, wonderful voice, and she's going to be performing with a small ensemble. Tia likes to perform with large bands. So this is a different kind of twist for her. She's going to do it. I think it's just a quartet that's performing behind her, pianist, bassist, drummer, and a horn player, I believe. And that's going to be at the Anacostia Arts Center on Good Hope Road. There's a lot of Anacostias going on here. They're in the 1200 block, 1231 Good Hope Road. And that's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And what we're suggesting is that people who come to our morning event that ends at 11, you might want to just go travel on over to the Anacostia Arts Center, because they've got a nice facility in the back that provides Sunday brunches at moderate prices. And so you can get something to eat and chill and get ready to listen to Tia perform beginning at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Then we move on to Monday and Tuesday at the Anacostia Playhouse. A lot of Anacostia, like I said. On Monday, our only program this season that's this particular series, I should say, that are celebrating Mr. Gillespie will be presented by trumpeter Freddie Dunn. That's one Monday at 8 o'clock at the Anacostia Playhouse. Their address is 2020 Shannon Place, Southeast, just around the corner from WEAC Radio. So if you're coming into Anacostia, you come in on Martin Luther King Avenue, the first street you come to, turn right, go to the end of the block. The only way you can go is left, turn left, and you'll see the Anacostia Playhouse midway down the block. So Freddie and his ensemble are going to perform on Monday evening. And then on Tuesday evening, vibraphonist Warren Wolf and bassist Chris Funn are going to do a duo. And they're going to be exploring Monk and other interesting music. That should be interesting. I've worked with both of these gentlemen over the years. In fact, in the very first event we did on March the 30th, 2008, at the Caton Castle in Baltimore to launch the BMO Jazz series, Warren played piano. Earl Wilson, guitarist, the late Earl Wilson, guitarist, actually helped me form that project. We ended up doing about 300 performances, more than 200 performances, I should say, in Baltimore over these years since 2008. It's 9 years now, and Warren was on the very first one, and he's performed several times with me at different, churches and art galleries and museums and we've done a lot of work together, and he's fairly well known nationally, internationally now. So it's hard to capture him, to get him to perform. So come check that out on Tuesday, the 13th of this month of June at the Anacostia Playhouse. Again, tickets are available on www.eastriverjazz.net. The last performance will take place on Saturday, June 17th at Fort DuPont at their community center, which is above, it's on the main the main road coming into Fort DuPont off of Minnesota Avenue. You get up toward the top of the hill, and there's a parking lot there that accommodates people coming in for the the festivals that do down in the on the main stage. But this performance will take place up next to the community center. And I was just told by someone just the other day, Bill Brower, in fact, who shared with me that Dizzy Gillespie, when he performed at Fort DuPont, he performed up in the same space that we're presenting. Lenny Robinson, he's a drummer, and he's going to do his take on Monk as well. And that would be the last event of the series. That's a free event up at Fort DuPont. That's outdoors on a Saturday afternoon. A little bit about my work with East River Jazz. East River Jazz actually began in the spring, actually May, June of 2011, when I presented 7 events at the Anacostia Art Gallery and Boutique that was run by Juanita Britton, right up the street from the Smithsonian Anacostia Community Museum. And we did 7 events. All of them featured artists that I had been working with in Baltimore. And a number of them, probably all of them actually, had performed at one time or another in D.C., but they had never been presented as a assemblage of Baltimore artists coming to D.C. in the manner in which I did it. So that took place in May, June of 2011. And the next year, 2012, we began our affiliation with the DC Jazz Festival as what they call an art Jazz in the Hoods partner. So from 2012 until this time, so it's 6 years that we're doing this East River Jazz Fest. The programs have been interesting over the years. We had Mark Carey come and do some performances one year. Back in 2015, 2 years ago, we celebrated Billy Strayhorn. Well, the whole year we celebrated Billy Strayhorn with about 43 different projects. But we did a series of Strayhorn music during our Jazz Fest that year. That was interesting. The reason I started to celebrate these artists in this way, well, there are a number of reasons. One was that we need to teach people about the history of the music, and what better way than to celebrate significant anniversaries like the 100th anniversary of a person's birth. So that's how we started with with Mr. Strayhorn, and then this year we have Miss Fitzgerald, Mr. Gillespie, and Mr. Monk. And each of the artists, I ask artists to bring forth a project interpreting the work of any of these iconic performers. And it's their choice about how they want to approach it. I don't get in the middle of that. I just simply ask them if they would do something that celebrates the artist. I do ask them to do, ideally throughout the performance, you'll notice that there'll be what we call a running narrative, and that's when they'll explain the music that they're doing, why they do it, etc., as an introduction to performing a particular piece. And if we do 2 sets, there's an intermission in the middle. Before the second set, we will have a conversation between the audience and the performers, and myself, in fact, as to why we're doing this particular program. And the audience has a chance to ask questions about what they've heard in the first set, or other information that they're interested in learning about the artists that we're celebrating. And it turns out to be, I found that audiences who come and experience this to really enjoy the idea of talking about the program, the music, how the music works, etc. We've done a lot of things like that, and I find the audience is really interested in that. And we're very much interested in turning young people on to the music, so we're figuring some ways in which to do that that will engage young people. Because if we don't, the music will not last. It has to stay alive, and one way for it to stay alive is for us to engage young people. In fact, I welcome any of you listening to this. If you have some ideas that you'd like for us to consider doing, especially ideas to engage young people, send me an email. My email is my name, Vernard Gray, VERNARDGRAY @gmail. Or if you feel like dialing the phone number, my phone number is 202-262-7571. And I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about these things. There's some other things that we're doing as well that I should share with you at this point. We've applied for, and hopefully we'll get the grant to do a survey this over the next 4 months, a project called Black Gatherings. The idea is to record, number one, to capture the names of places that we gathered, events in which we gathered, or charismatic individuals with whom we interacted, like Marion Barry as an example, or Chuck Brown, or Ed Murph, or other significant individuals, Dorothy I. Height, the list goes on and on and on, that we've had some interaction with. And so we're going to capture those names to create a database, and we're going to do it through a series of conversations that most likely will take place in libraries, where the public's invited to come in to discuss these things. There will be an app online, an application on a form online, actually, that you can be able to go to and add your suggestion of something we should include. It could be anything: a place, an event, an individual. It could be a church, school, art gallery, artist studio, an exhibit that you went to, that was memorable. What we will ultimately do, ideally, is working with some people to develop an application that can be downloaded onto a phone, where a person can search for something they're interested in, talking about, find it, and then do a recording on their phone, like I'm doing now, on their phone, that ultimately gets uploaded to a database of material that will be searchable. So when our babies and our babies' babies and our babies' babies' babies and on down, when they want to know about what happened during this period of time, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, even the 40s, 80s, the 90s, and into the new millennium, things that we were involved with, engaged with, etc., then they'll be able to find that stuff. And then they can write stories, write books about the history of this period of time, because they'll be informed from people who actually experienced these things. It's important, especially during this period of time, to do something like this. And ideally, this particular project will be a demonstration of a project that is applicable in any number of different places. I had a conversation earlier this evening with a fellow from Los Angeles who's involved in the beauty industry, and talking about the disappearance of black businesses in the beauty, barber and the beauty industry, and significantly taken over by Asians and other people. And so at some point down the road, we may find that there are not too many places that are owned by blacks that do hair, for instance. We need to be able to tell those stories about the richness of the history of our businesses, our neighborhoods, and things of that sort. Especially, in Washington, I drive around, and where I live, in fact, I look out my window, and it's a building. I used to be able to see the skyline. Now there's a building that's coming up that's blocking the skyline. And I live high up. I'm on the 9th floor of a 10th floor building, and I can't see the Capitol any longer, for instance, from my balcony. And the people who are going to move into that building are most likely what we call gentrifiers, and some of them indeed have some sensitivity to what was here before, but a significant number of them don't. I was looking at a real estate listing of talking about Deanwood Northeast, and it's really interesting. Up and coming Deanwood. Up and coming Deanwood. Now, Deanwood, the Deanwood community is more than 100 years old. It was the first black community developed post-slavery in Washington, D.C. You hear me? Deanwood is more than 100 years old, but a real estate person listing it for gentrifiers to come and check out call it an up-and-coming community. Now, if we don't record Deanwood stories to make sure that they are around for hundreds of years from now, nobody will know about that. Our children won't know about it. Our children's children will know about it. It's up and coming Deanwood. You hear me? Up and coming. So anyway, Black Gatherings is a project to address that. I just finished doing a proposal to the D.C. Commission on the Arts and Humanities, where I'm proposing, of course, that we continue to do jazz programming, and I think we're committed to doing 22 events next year. We always do more, but that's what we're committing to do, 22 events next year. And I think half of them, 11 of them will be I think we're proposing at least half of them are performance and half of them are conversations or workshops, etc., to take place, exploring the history of this music, which is really the history of our community. We look at bebop in the bebop era, especially Dizzy and Monk and them. They created music. Max Roach, etc. They created music in relationship to what was going on then. I'm looking on a screen on TV right now. Miles Davis Tutu. You know, he created some music around Bishop Tutu. You know, artists did that. In jazz especially, and we want to explore those social movements in connection with the music as well. So some of that will take place next year. But another thing that we are initiating is something called Made East River, and that's to beat the bushes and find folk who make stuff. I think especially we'll find a lot of people who really do some elegant cooking, for instance, curator. I'm twisting my words up. Culinary art, and I think that east of the river we've got opportunities to grow some food on some of these lots that are unused. To grow food that can be used to feed folk, number one, and especially to supply the people who do the culinary arts in this area. And we stop talking about food deserts when we can create our own food gardens, let's say. So I'm really interested in that particular area of the arts. But there are the other arts. They're illustrators, they're musicians, they're wordsmiths, they're people who do all kinds of work, creative work, services to the art community as well. I'm very much interested in exploring that and developing, basically just develop a searchable database where you're looking for a particular service, you can find it east of the river. Because I know these things exist, but there's no real online database, for instance, where you can find people, search on a word, and you looking for somebody who can, what's that, it's a certain cake that they create, red velvet cake, for instance. It's somebody who specializes, and there's a whole bunch of folks who specialize in that red velvet cake, for instance. That unless you live in a neighborhood and know Miss Annie that lives 2 doors up does it, you wouldn't know where to go find something like that. But there should be a database online, searchable database where people can go and say, oh, okay, I can go to Miss Annie. She lives over on Clay Place Northeast, and call her up, order a cake, and begin to have an exchange of enterprises amongst us. And that's a dessert, but you could say also somebody could be growing salad greens in their backyard, or working. It's very much interested in hydroponic growth, where you grow food using water, as an example. There are any number of things that I'm quite sure people are doing and interested in, but we need to know more about who they are, where they are, and building a community around creative enterprises. So that's what Made East River is. So at that, I'm gonna shut up. This has been wonderful. I'm going to put it up and I'm going to point it to folks and say, come listen to me run my mouth about this stuff. I've enjoyed it for this first time launching of a talk on YouTube. Come listen to this music, please. www.jazzfest, eastriverjazz.net. Just come and listen to it. 3 of the events we charge under $20 for them, and 4 of the events are absolutely free. We do ask that you consider donating for us to continue to do this work. Thank you. Take care.